Hi again. In this video we're going to run through the exercises associated with this respiratory laboratory and the calculations that you need to make. So the first calculation we're going to ask you to make is to calculate the inspiratory capacity using this equation 4 here. So inspiratory capacity, or IC for short, equals the tidal volume VT plus the inspiratory reserve volume in litres. So calculate the tidal volume from your spirometry data. Calculate also the inspiratory reserve volume from your deep breath at the end and compared to your normal tidal volume. That will give you your inspiratory reserve volume, and if you add these two together it gives you your inspiratory capacity. The next exercise will be to calculate the expiratory capacity. So to calculate expiratory capacity, use this equation 5. EC equals tidal volume plus expiratory reserve volume. Again, you will have calculated the expiratory reserve volume and tidal volume from the spirometry data that you've collected within the lab. So EC equals VT plus ERV. That's the expiratory capacity. The next calculation we'll ask you to do is to calculate vital capacity. So using the calculations that you have for inspiratory reserve volume and expiratory reserve volume and tidal volume, if you add these three together, this gives you your vital capacity. The next calculation will be to calculate residual volume. So the residual volume is the volume of gas remaining in the lungs after a maximal expiration. The residual volume cannot be determined by the spirometry recordings that you have undertaken. So using equation 7, we must determine a predicted residual volume value for the volunteer. So this equation predicts residual volume for 16 to 34-year-old participants of either sex, okay, which is predominantly the cohort that we have in this particular lab group. So the predicted equation for residual volume equals predicted vital capacity multiplied by 0.25. Now, we have calculated vital capacity in equation 6, so you can use that vital capacity here and multiply it by 0.25, and that will give an estimate of our residual volume. The next calculation we'll ask you to conduct is total lung capacity. So this is the sum of the vital capacity and residual volume. So calculated the predicted total lung capacity for the volunteer using equation 8. So total lung capacity equals vital capacity plus residual volume. And then the last calculation that we'll ask you to make is functional residual capacity. So this is the volume of gas remaining in the lungs at the end of a normal tidal expiration. So we calculate the FRC using functional residual capacity equals our expiratory reserve volume plus our residual volume, which we've calculated in some of the previous equations. So you can use that data to calculate your functional residual capacity. Okay, there are the exercises, there are the calculations that we need to do on our own data. So we can do that for each of our own data at this point.